Welcome to the May meeting of the Big Hole Watershed Committee. We'll start with a round of introductions as we always do. My name is Pedro Marquez. I'm the Executive Director of the Big Hole Watershed Committee, and we'll go around this way this time.
I'm Kurnick, I'm the Associate Director of the Big Hole Watershed Committee.
Ben Laporte, Restoration Program Manager.
Diane Hutton.
Jeff Ward, Glenn. Stuart Jennings, Edaphix, guest speaker.
Rebecca Kurnick, also Edaphix.
Mark Bangles, recorder.
Julie King.
Howard Garner, I live down by Jackson. That's Glenn. Ron Brightmeyer, Montana Bureau of Mines and Geology.
Shenandoah, Bureau of Mines and Geology.
Steve Peterson, Ranch Bureau of Treatment. Jim Hagen, part of the Ranch Bureau.
Lacey Decker, Outdoor Rec Planner for BLM at the Dillon Field Office. There's Joel Director, Wiser, Montana. Overview. Any overview?
Hey, thanks everybody. It's a good diverse group today. Let's jump into our climate precip report that we will be getting. Caitlin is going to jump on and share her screen, I think. Let me see. Caitlin, are you seeing the ability to do that yet? Yep. What is the Oh, I'm sharing screen. I need this. Oh no, that's you. You're muted, Caitlin. Yeah, it looks like it's coming up now. Are you muted? Caitlin, you're muted. I can't hear you. Maybe she knows that.
There we go. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Oh, you're going cell phone.
Yeah. Can you still hear me?
Yep. I'm going to
Okay.
hold the mic up.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Caitlin Boren. I'm with Montana DNRC. I apologize that I'm not here tonight. I was up in the Flathead and we just got back this evening. So I'm just going to get started on the precip snowpack report. Right now, snowpack in the Big Hole watershed is sitting at 96% of median values. However, the Hypsami Sui is at 121%. You can see that here in this first graph, we're sitting right on average. So that's good for this time of year.
Caitlin, hold on one sec. Tana's going to do the screen share because it'll come in bigger.
Okay.
Over here. It's coming in just a little too small.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, it's okay. No worries. So I'm feeling, oh, wait, maybe. Oh, look at that. I can choose the screen that I'm showing. There it is.
Oh, sweet.
I just learned something today. Wow. Okay.
All right. So modeled snowpack from the Hypsami Sui indicates that lower elevation snowpack is gone for the season, which we all know. Mid-range snowpack is well above average still, and the high elevation snowpack is slightly above average. As far as snow-tell sites go, Bloody Dick is at, I think it's pretty low at 3.1 observed. Dark Horse is at 26.2 observed, and that's at 94% NRCS median. And let's see what else. Calvert Creek is at 94%. So we're doing good on that. Below that is the snow water equivalent graph, like I was just speaking to a second ago. Here's below that is the Hypsami Sui. It's that purple graph. I can't quite see if you're scrolling down.
Yeah, she's following you.
Okay, awesome. So I think that there's something going on with this data because you can see that big dip on the mid elevation, low elevation values. but I think we're still sitting pretty good at those medium elevations, and we're still above average at the higher elevations. Scrolling down to precip, we're sitting at 97% of normal, which is good. Hopefully we stay on that track with some good spring precip. I'm going to switch over to runoff and CFS right now. We're in spring conditions, and that's because we had those longer lower temperatures going through January, February, March, and that kept the Big Hole River in ice conditions longer than normal. This has transitioned into warmer temperatures towards the end of April, and that resulted in our low elevation snowbelt that we saw. And then that transitioned the ice, it melted it real quickly and went into spring runoff conditions on the river. Runoff conditions right now should remain until mid-June, hopefully. And right now they're following a general trend to be peaking the first or second week of June. Moving down to CFS, I just put most of the major sites that we have right now, USGS and DNRC. You can see by the trend that we kind of had that that slow spring melt, and then all of a sudden we had those higher temperatures, which jumped up the CFS pretty high, and now it dropped back down, and now we're kind of going up towards that spring runoff peak, which we should see towards June. Let's move on to the outlooks for forecasts. 8 to 14 day outlook. We're looking at above average temperatures and then near normal average precipitation. And then seasonally, 3-month outlook, we've got an equal chance of below or normal temperatures, and then we've got about an equal to below chance for average precip. And that's for this season, May, June, and July. Right now, ENSO is reporting an El Nino watch. They're saying that there's a 90% chance of El Nino persisting in the Northern Hemisphere into the winter. And what that means is that there's the water temperatures in the ocean are staying high enough that they're predicting that there's going to be a 90% chance of that. So Montana, that usually means that it's going to be a drier fall and winter, and potentially that could mean that we have some late summer water restrictions just to keep an eye on. But it's the Big Hole, so we're as if we get a good precip this spring and continuing in through the first or second week of June, we might be sitting pretty good, hopefully, as Maui says. So, and that's about it for me. This is my first time doing the river flow information. Is there any questions that you guys have or anything that you would like to see that I didn't show?
Yeah, anybody?
Very good report.
Good report. We're getting thumbs up in the room here.
Awesome. That's good to hear.
Yeah. And it's, I feel like even since I've been here, this has been kind of how it's been reported. And
okay,
unless there's new ways of reporting the data, I feel like everyone's pretty happy with how things are going, right?
Okay. Yeah, I want to I'm here for you guys. So whatever would be the best information to help you guys, making decisions and going forward. I'm here to change whatever you guys need.
Awesome. Thank you, Kaylin. You
Thanks.
can make it rain consistently on July 1st.
I know, that's what I'm praying for.
Awesome. I appreciate you coming on with us.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. All right. The next thing is director's report, and I'm sheepishly just going to say I don't have a slide prepared. I will just go. It's just been running ragged in the field a lot. Didn't have time to kind of consolidate everything. So I'll just give you kind of a high level overview of what's been on my plate, and then we'll kind of move through really quickly on the rest of the reports. We got Allison has moved in. We got her set up at the new Willow Creek acquisition. She is our conservation fellow from MCC for this season. Pretty exciting. She has a nicer house than any of us. It's a really sweet place. It's like a 3-bedroom house, and she's just going to share it with one fisheries technician who's coming in for FWP. So she's got a beautiful wraparound deck looking out into the new acquisition. She's excited. she was blown away by how much room she has and that there's an elevator in the house. I will be crashing there tonight. She's in training in Bozeman for MCC for her program. And then Monday gets started. So her job and focus, FWP with the Superfund contract we have will be, she'll be really focused on the uplands, but we can definitely, poach her and have her help out with all the other work that we do. So we'll meet her at the next meeting. We're excited for her. We had a great sort of community show of support. Meg Smith gave us some furniture. Anaconda Sportsman came and a guy donated a bed. The Fairmont Hot Springs donated some old furniture that they were remodeling rooms. So I've spent actually a lot of time lugging my trailer around and picking up furniture. So we've been able to sort of furnish this house. Ben gave us a bunch of kitchen stuff. So she's kind of set up, and it was a really just awesome show of solidarity, I guess, to get this place up and running. Vanna had a big work party out there, taking down fences. That place, talk about a place that needs some weed control. Oh boy, it's kind of like some of what we inherited on the game range, which was like knapweed, like this high as far as you can see. So that's going to be an effort, but it's an exciting space that FWP has, and all indications are that, if as we're continuing and working in the Superfund site, as long as most of the work is dedicated to that area, this is a position that we could fill annually and really boost our capacity to get this work done. So I'm pretty animated about that. We've had Peyton Butler has been cranking out social media stuff, and that's been great. Tana's now back and fully managing that situation. So that's taken a load off of me as well. Also, it's great to have Tana back. The wheels were just sort of duct taped onto the bus there for a little while. Let's see, other big picture stuff. We've been signing off on contracts. So we signed off on a partner agreement for conifer encroachment in the Trail Creek area with the Forest Service. That came through, signed, sealed, delivered, ready to go. FWP is working on sole sourcing us for the Anaconda Superfund stuff. That is so far no hiccups, ready to go. BLM just gave us some more money for the partnership agreement we've got with them. So this is a trend. I like it. Just establishing these longer term cooperative agreements that facilitate the agencies to move money to us so we can get things done. So it doesn't get choked up in bureaucratics. I think that is a real sweet spot for this organization. So folks they get it. Ben already knocked one project out, this season already. So through that type of arrangement, we're also going to be talking to FWP about a potential arrangement. So the Arctic Grayling Recovery Program, I just spent the day with the Grayling program, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service up in Wisdom. They need to renew their agreement with the state to continue the Grayling program. And I've been learning a little bit more about how that works. So the feds get the money, and then through agreements with the state agencies can capture that money and then deploy it for the work that we do, right? All the stuff that Jim McGee's doing up there. So they're going to they're working on the language for that agreement between FWP and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They're going to carbon copy that agreement and make one with us for the Fish and Wildlife for FWP to, again, facilitate the partnerships and moving stuff to us. FWP is shifting right now. The administration is shifting. This agreement, hopefully, if we can pull it through, is going to be a way to work around some of the stuff that's happening where FWP, it feels like they are flush with cash for the first time maybe ever and feeling like they don't need partners. It's not exactly that language, but it's like, it gets more complicated if there's too many people and too many funding sources. It's easier if it's just, why don't we just pay for it? Which kind of goes against all of the great partnership-based success that we've been having. So we're sort of slowly working on maintaining the agreements and partnerships on paper so that we can continue doing the good work that we do, right? So we've got good allies at the biologist level in support of this general direction. So they're pushing I feel good about where that's all gonna land. I'll let Ben's gonna,
Very relevant to the South Fork,
that's right.
or the North Fork of the South Fork.
Yeah, the reservoir there
Yeah,
on Divide Creek.
we're partnering with FWP and the Fish and Wildlife Service on that one, and then this came, I got a phone call saying, hey,
You don't have to go for money.
yeah, don't put too much into this because we might not need you, in the nicest of words.
Yeah.
So, our role as a committee is diminished quite a bit on that project.
Anyway, we'll work around that. That's and it's a temporary thing, right? 3 years from now, FWP will turn around and wake up and be like, where did all the money go? Where's all the partners? So, we'll make sure to keep it going, keep it active. Boy, I really don't have a ton of other stuff, a lot of just kind of housekeeping admin stuff. We did briefly, I don't know if y'all caught Senate Bill 442, which was like one of the more bipartisan, gigantic coalition of groups that came together to pass this piece of legislation. It was the allocation of marijuana money through the state. And, you all signed off on a letter in support of that bill. They would have created a new funding mechanism that would have been really applicable to the type of irrigation structure projects that we do for landowners. Weed control, the WHIP program would have been juiced quite a bit. Governor just vetoed that thing when it got to his desk. For a moment there, we were trying to get the Secretary of State to petition the legislators to do a poll to see if they could override the veto. I don't think that's going to happen. But kind of at this point, I think there may be some legislative avenues legal actions, but I don't know anything about it and I'm staying the heck out of it. Which I think is y'all would support, unless you tell me to jump into that. Yeah. So we'll see. I don't know how much time is left there on the clock as far as the bills and so the governor still has some line item kind of ability to knock stuff out of the budget. We'll see where that goes, but generally speaking, I think the session is done for me, which that's a good thing. Okay. I'm going to leave it at that. I really just don't have a ton of other big picture stuff other than keeping these partnerships together and supporting these two to do all the great work that they do. So we'll move on to steering committee. Do we have any updates? Nothing? Okay. No news is good news.
Under who says grabbing the steering wheel?
All right. Sweet. I like that. I'm going to use that. Okay. Outreach and wildlife. Danny, you ready?
Yep.
Do I need to do any? You got it?
All right. Well, first I'm going to do communications. So in June, we have our fishery update with Jim Olson. Then in August, we'll hear from Cole Mannix with the Old Salt Co-op about their farm to market program. And then September and October, we're still working on pinning down which of those months is going to be which of these topics, but we'll hear about wildlife and sage grouse from FWP and Fish and Wildlife Service. And then this is an exciting event in June. We'll have our annual Wildlife Speaker Series event. And this year we're going down to Melrose. It'll be at the Melrose Bar on June 14th. And we'll be hearing from the Clark Fork Watershed Education Program about macroinvertebrates. And it's going to include a potluck dinner. We'll provide the main dish. Haven't figured out quite what it's going to be yet. And then we'll have a presentation afterward at 7. So yeah, looking forward to trying out a new menu, and we haven't done this in Melrose yet. So, and excited to hear more about macroinvertebrates. So hope some of you will come out and join us. And it's a kid-friendly event too. So
What day is it?
it's Wednesday. It's a week before our monthly meeting in June. And then drought communication. So we're now sending out weekly drought updates. through text message and email. So if you're on our email list, you'll get them no matter what. If you'd like to see them via text message, you can text drought to 26989 and we'll sign you up. And it's just it's a quick text that shows the stream gauge readings for each section and the drought management plan status. So right now, all the sections are open to fishing. We're in a good spot. And carcass removal for this year, we finally got it up and running in May. We had a little bit of a delay this year with the dump truck that we normally use getting snowed in down in the Centennial Valley. But FP let us borrow a trailer. They put a winch on it and rails and ramps. And our carcass compost manager, John, will drive that around the local ranches and pick up your livestock carcasses and haul them back to our compost site right outside of Wisdom. We do that to try and prevent predators from being lured into calving areas and lambing areas. So if you have need of that service, you can just call or text John. They're at 209-628-2225. And there are also magnets on the table in the back with his information on. You're welcome to take a few of those. And this is a collaborative program. So between the trailer being, the use of the trailer donated from FWP, and then John Jackson, who's a board member of ours and rancher in Jackson, lets us use his tractor to move and turn the carcasses on the compost piles. And then Cash T Diamond Post and Pole out of Polaris donates wood chips each year for the composting process. So thank you to everyone who contributes to that program. And yeah, that's all I've got. We're planning to do our range rider program again this summer, starting in July. And I've sent out supplement forms to the enrolled ranchers. So they're gonna get them back to me before the end of the month. And that's so we can apply for livestock loss board funding this month. And yeah, that's all I've got. Oh, I should have put a slide up about this, but there are some bear trainings, bear awareness, bear safety, bear free trainings coming up in the Big Hole in June. And we'll be sending out a social media post about that soon, but one will be in Divide and one will be in Wisdom in mid-June. So if you have any interest in those, get in touch with me. I'll let you know the dates and times. Sorry, we're gonna do a slide. And yeah, I'll hand it on to Ben and he'll tell us about restoration. Oh, unless there are any questions or if anybody has any. All right, restoration.
We can do an email about that.
Yeah. we
too.
will send an email.
Do an email plus. You do it? Okay. Oh, you got it, yeah.
Cool. Just like Pedro, my report will be pretty brief.
So you have to change the slide and share,
Oh, yeah. Wait, I am viewing fairness. No? What am I doing? What am I doing, Tana?
Changing the slide you're sharing, so it should show Ben's.
Oh, I'm doing it. Okay.
I'm sharing it, but however you did it before, or you can share it.
Yeah, let me do. Here. Okay.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, one of the highlights or one of the things that was on my plate for this month was I wrote a grant for the Future Fisheries Improvement Program, which is a fisheries grant program that we often go to for native fisheries projects. And I think I mentioned this a couple meetings back, but Jim Olson came to me and said, hey, I got these culvert issues on the Hagen area. And what do you know, it's in the French Creek drainage where they did all their native fisheries work. In the process of him doing all this work, they found 4 culverts that are impeding fish passage. 2 of them need to get removed and 2 of them need to be replaced. This is a map of where they are on the Mount Hagen Wildlife Management Area. 2 are on Little California Creek. 1 is on Julius Gulch here, and then the other one's on 6 Mile Creek, which is on the Dry Creek Road. So yeah, that I wrote that one up and we sent that, and knock on wood, we get it. I think if we do get that one, then I think ball will be moving pretty quick to get it done this fall. Jim McGee and the Fish and Wildlife Service are partnering on this, and they have a good chunk of change to help match with this one. So with this future fisheries proposal, we should have all the cash in hand to get that project done. So I'll be going there in Butte to kind of propose this project to the review panel, and I think we have a pretty good application. And this is just a photo of the 6 Mile culvert. That one's where a good chunk of the change is going to go for this project. It's the biggest culvert. Right now, I think it's 2 3 feet long culverts that are perched 2 feet high, and it's too steep. So there's no way fish are getting up there. And I think Jim knew about it, but then it really got on his radar when he was doing all the rotenone treatments and fish reintroductions. So that one in its by itself will open up 4 miles of tributary, and combined, when we address all of these culverts, will open up just over 8 miles. So this and that Upper French Gulch fish passage, man, we're making, that's about 10 miles of stream habitat that we'd open up in 2 years. So really beneficial work. So this 6 Mile Creek will just be, we'll replace both of those twin culverts with a 5 foot long 60 or 5 foot diameter by 60 foot long culvert, put gravel in there. There's quite a bit of grade to catch, so we'll probably have to build a couple of step pools for the fish to hop into. But yeah, that one should be cool. Hopefully you'll hear more about it after June when we hear back from them. Other than that, I've been working on our spring newsletter articles, working with Tana on getting what she needs to get that out the door here in a bit. Be on the lookout for our newsletter. Doing some grant reporting as always. Wrote an article too for the Big Hole Beans. I don't know if anyone saw it this month. Did anyone see that come through the mail? Was my article in there? Cool. All right. I didn't get it. I was like, well, Jane didn't send me the Big Hole Breezes. Forwarded along to me if anyone got it in the email. Did you get it down? Okay. It's just outreach stuff, important work for me to do. Get the word out on all the good work that we've been up to. Pedro mentioned the BLM participating agreement. We were working with those folks this month to update that. That's $15,000 that will go straight to on the ground projects. I just got off the horn with the hydrologist this afternoon, and it's just, we have so many projects lined up now, and then of course we just need more money to do it. Right? Classic scenario, but that's exciting. And Pedro didn't mention, I think I mentioned last month too, but we're filling the pot for Elkhorn in that participating agreement as well. So that's a very beneficial thing. I got away last week and checked out some of the project work that we did last year in those Eastern Pioneer tributaries, one off of Trapper Creek and one off of Browns Gulch. And they're little tributaries, they're trickles really, but the project work that we did looks really great. So this is on Trapper Creek, and this is just a channel spanning beaver dam analog that before this water would have just been jetting out like a fire hose, and we have some really good cooling. We're getting some good groundwater saturation. Some sediment has been built up against there, and this is just one example. We did 30 of these structures in both of these reaches, but this is in Browns Gulch, and you can see it's hard to take photos of these things, but that's a pretty deep pool. So that project looks really, really good. I was really impressed with how things have been looking up there. There is a little bit of maintenance that we need to do, which we will do this year with the youth employment program. But man, I think that it looks really good. There's not a whole lot of work that we need to do right now. It was still really low. I was assuming that both of these things would be cranking right now, but perhaps it hasn't turned on yet. So I'll be back there maybe next week or the week after that to see how things are looking with a little bit of higher flows. But yeah, that's about all I have, guys. Any questions for me? All right.
Did you agree on
No, no. We've only done one project with fish in them, Jim, and that was in the East Fork of Divide Creek. And that was just brook trout. So Jimmy O gave us the green light on that one. There was really no concerns for anything there, just because it was a brook trout stream. We have yet to encounter one with West Slope cutties or any grayling or really important fishery. There's no fish in here, and it's intermittent, so it's very just kind of groundwater, late season water availability, ponding, heavy focused.
You see that as a barrier, Jim?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He discriminated against brook trout on the region.
Yeah, he is. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a totally valid, it's the question that comes up all the time with this beaver stuff. Oh, maybe I didn't give the update on the beaver working group I did last time, but the state is moving. It's currently in the state of Montana, you can't relocate a beaver. FWP, you would have to do an EA per beaver currently, because you're moving wildlife, which is about as stupid as you can get for a system, pardon my French. But they are working now on a plan so that they identify suitable locations where beaver can be reintroduced, where the habitat is right, where the chances of them persisting in that location are good. And then they will, this will be about a 2-year process that then they'll come out with specifications and regs on how you translocate a beaver. Every state, most of the Western states, the states to the west of us all have this stuff dialed. They've been doing this kind of thing. They're certifying kind of citizen scientists and teaching them how to capture a beaver, quarantine them to make sure that, you know, tularemia, I think is the name of the, tularemia, thank you, is just some virus that gets them. And so you got the quarantine issue is a big deal as far as moving beaver. So they're on their way to moving in that direction where you would have in different sub watersheds locations that are pre-approved, and then they would basically do an EA, some sort of a NEPA process clearing those areas, which would then facilitate ranchers, landowners, anybody, you know, with the right guidance to move problem beaver to a place and avoid having to, you know, remove them completely from the landscape. So that's the process that we're sort of following. I'm on the beaver working group. State of Montana is a beaver working group, and we're helping just kind of tracking that process. What's going on in beaver? Y'all ready to move some beaver? I'll never forget the day I was up here talking BDAs and the glory of beaver, and Dean walks in, mud up to here. He's like, yeah, I just finished pulling an excavator out of a beaver pond. And I was like, there you go, right there, right? You've got the pros and the cons of the beaver, right? In that one conversation, I'll never forget it. You know, doing it smart, trying to be smart about when we move them and where they can be an asset on the landscape. They can hold water, they can pond water, as long as they're not doing it where you're going to get your excavator stuck. I don't know, maybe Dean needs a new driver. I don't know. Just kidding. Any other news that's not on the agenda? Any other business that we didn't put on there? Anything going on that didn't catch my attention? Yes.
Maiden Rock, we went out for bids and got a contract for Maiden Rock. So I just want to give everybody a heads up before I kind of go out with an announcement when it's going to be kind of shut down. We're going to keep the road open to the boat launch at Maiden Rock, and the boat launch will be open for everybody, but we are redoing the parking lot right there and the campground area. So we're going to try to keep it as so people can still get in and out and get boats in and out. But we're looking at starting end of July or end of June into the first part of July and doing demolition, actually building the campground. So it will be kind of a pain in the butt for everybody for a while, but we're hoping for some good campground and actual parking lot for the boat ramp, which we're hoping to replace maybe next year. So, yeah. And I don't have any updates for Divide or Cherry Creek or anything like that. I know that they're getting close to the end of it. I'm hoping that will be soon too. So it's pretty close. Okay. This one, yeah, I just drove by that one the day. Oh,
Okay. This is great. We've got a little extra time to snack. And then we'll come back and we're really excited to have Stuart and talk about Edaphix. But to have him blow your mind and give him enough time that you can go off on as many tangents as possible. And you guys can grill him with great questions. So yeah, have some snacks, have some chats. We'll see you back here in maybe 5 till. Okay, so just as a quick introduction, when I started as a consultant on the Mount Hagen site, as I tend to do, I have some ideas about how things should happen, and I had some plans for restoration. And the EPA had their liaison sort of oversight person to make sure all of the remedy that was happening on Stuckey Ridge and the Anaconda Uplands was going well. And so we would have some crazy ideas. Then this guy Stuart would come in and say, actually, let's actually get some numbers to what you're thinking. And the evolution, I can say, of the Mount Hagen Superfund work really got a solid foundation from Stuart's oversight of that work. It really, and as a professional, I can say I grew tremendously with your lead, helping me set up test plots and demonstrations and how you go from a photograph that says, see, this works, to calculations and numbers of what is actually happening on the ground. And ever since then, I've been following his work and thought that he'd be an excellent speaker for today. So without further ado, and now he has Rebecca, who's with him working for Edaphix, who is that some too, or?
I think I'm going to do all at the time, unless I lose my voice.
Okay,
You're stuck with me.
awesome. So anyway, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Stuart Jennings.
Woohoo, thank you. That's the warmest introduction I've ever had. So thank you, Pedro. And I thought about putting a photo in here, Pedro and I working 20 years ago, and I didn't do it.
I can dig some of those up.
Yeah, I know they exist. So it's great to be here. I love being on the big bowl. And Pedro and I have talked about invasive plants our whole career, because in the Anaconda Upland example, we had either no plants or we had weeds. And neither of those we wanted. So we had to come up with the strategies for getting primarily native plant life back on the landscape. And over a long process, there was a lot of great work done. So what I have tonight is a story I think you'll find interesting. And Becca has suggested that I make a t-shirt that says "We fertilize weeds," because people would think that we were crazy. And I think this is a bit of a crazy idea, and it's really fun because it actually works. And some of the origins of these ideas came from my work in Anaconda long ago. Man, as a matter of fact, there's a jug of copper liquid on the table here, and I'm sending that with Pedro back to Missoula because his neighbor wants to try to make fewer dandelions in their yard. And it turns out at the Anaconda smelter site, they used to make lots of copper. There was a mountain of copper that went into the atmosphere, and then it precipitated out back on the landscape as copper oxides and sulfates, and acidified the soil and killed all the plant life, and especially the dandelions. In places where you could, 5 miles from the smelter, you could find more dandelions than you've ever seen in your lifetime. And as you got closer and closer to the smelter, you would find fewer and fewer dandelions, and they had black leaves and red spots. But the grasses were still growing fine. And I said, isn't this interesting? The grasses seem more tolerant of this smelter deposition than the dandelions do. So dandelions are kind of an indicator species. And I don't plan to talk at length about dandelions, but I have at least one dandelion slide in here. And I'm sending Pedro home with a Ziploc bag and a bottle of copper juice. And I'm predicting he's going to have fewer dandelions on a test plot in Missoula.
The north side test plot up and running.
Okay, coming up. So I gave my title a fancy name: Novel Fertilization Strategies for Improving Perennial Vegetation Cover in Annual Grass Affected Pastures. And I'm going to talk mostly about cheatgrass, one of the annual grasses tonight. I did put a few introductory slides in here to show that we're working on other plants as well, like knapweed. So Tana asked me for an intro as to what I'm going to talk about tonight. And I posed the question, what soil conditions lead to more weeds? So it's kind of a chicken and the egg conversation we're having. Is it the soil that controls the presence of weeds? Or is it the presence of weed seeds that control the persistence of soil, of weeds on the landscape? So we have spent most of our time as land managers addressing the weeds and not addressing the soil on the assumption that the weeds are the only problem. And my question to you is, what if the soil actually control the distribution of weeds more than we know? What if we fertilized weeds? Can nutrient-dense soil be used as a management tool to prevent or discourage the growth of invasive plants? We've all seen vegetation patterns on the landscape suggesting soils impart a strong influence on the distribution of invasive plants. What if we could change soil fertility in a way that promoted the growth of desirable plants and not invasives? We'll explore examples where desirable perennial plants have outcompeted weeds when treated with novel fertilizer formulations, emphasizing micronutrient fertility with emphasis on cheatgrass management. And that's the only text slide I'm going to read tonight, but to stay true to my story with Tanner, that's where I'm headed. And you can interrupt me as I'm going. And Pedro said we have to, if Q&A works better on the fly, we can slam on the brakes and take a question, or we can pick it up at the end too. So thinking about plant growth from an agronomic point of view, this slide, I like the graphic, so I stole it. It's actually from houseplants. Can you explain why potted plants often look sickly? Well, I like this because they emphasize that low phosphorus, low potassium, low magnesium, low nitrogen, these are all conditions you could encounter in a potted plant, because that's just kind of a microcosm of a landscape, a rangeland, or a plowed field. And we have a tremendous amount of experience adding nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, the big three in commercial cropping systems, because the fertilizer industry is about a $200 billion a year enterprise, and about 60% of that money goes to nitrogen fertilizer, about 20% goes to phosphorus, about 20% goes to potassium. So when it comes to micronutrients, which the plants also need in smaller amounts, that is just the micro wedge of the fertilizer industry, but increasing in its importance over time. So this just sort of frames these sickly looking plants. Like, imagine if these are our native rangeland plants. Like, what are the nutritional requirements of blue bunch wheatgrass? Well, we don't really know. I worked at MSU for many years. I've seen the research of all the departments there. Like, nobody has ever studied the nutritional requirements of dandelions or the nutritional requirements of spotted knapweed. Our only approach to thinking about the conditions that lead to their proliferation relate to how many times you spray them with herbicides. So I'd like to say that is an excessively narrow way of looking at a very complicated landscape problem. So anytime somebody has given you a problem in your lifetime and told you there was just only one way to fix it, they were probably wrong. And you all work on these complicated landscapes, you know.
I know that one.
So I had to throw a plot in here for Pedro. So this is a test plot from Mount Hagen. This is one we did long ago, because we went to these really deeply eroded hillsides that are the headwaters of the Big Hole and said, how do we fix these? Do we cover them with erosion control fabric? Do we burn them? Do we seed them? What do we do? So one of the first things we did is we changed the fertility. So this is an example where I took a Ziploc bag of fertilizer out there, and I put out a test plot, and a couple of years later, and this is with no seed, suddenly we had stabilizing, excellent vegetation cover from a one-time application of fertilizer. So we said, oh, I guess maybe we should do some of this as part of our condition rehabilitation. So I asked the question, where do weeds grow? Well, they grow where the soil conditions and the climate allow them to grow. So at this site, there's plenty of water. It's at the Continental Divide. There's plenty of seed. We didn't add any seed here. We just added the fertility. What if we're able to change the soil that weeds struggled or never became established? So what if farmers designed the soil chemistry for the crop? Well, they do that already by using NPK fertility, because those are the nutrients that plants need. But if you're a wheat farmer, you know you need a lot of nitrogen in the soil. You don't add a lot of phosphorus or potassium because you don't get the yield you want by adding the wrong kind of fertilizer. So the broken part of this system, from my point of view, is that we have looked at invasive plants, both in cropping systems and on rangeland, as solely a problem associated with the presence or absence of petrochemical sprays. That is a narrowly defined solution to a complicated problem that comes to you from companies that depend on recurring revenue. And none of those companies are here in the room tonight, so I'm gonna feel free to badmouth my herbicide spraying friends a little bit. They arguably are only treating the symptoms of unhealthy soil. So if we all want healthy soils, don't we, right? That we want healthy food, we want healthy livestock, we want healthy soil. How do we go about doing that? So I thought I would give you some examples here, so I'm not just barraging you with text slides. This is a knapweed test plot near Fairmont and German Gulch. So we were just talking at the break about how much knapweed there is in the Fairmont area. So one of my good collaborators here is Vanna Bacadori, who Pedro's obviously well connected with. She asked me to set up some test plots to test the fertilizer on knapweed on the game range. So we put some plots in the fall of 2019. And in 2022, where we put the fertilizer down, we had 3% knapweed cover on the low treatment rate, 1% knapweed cover on high treatment rate, and the untreated had 15% knapweed. Vanna said, okay, this works. And Paul Peterson was going to try to be here tonight, and he's not here, but I talked to him on the phone yesterday, and he said, wow, we are so excited about this approach, because this works better than any herbicide we have ever used, because FWP does a lot of herbicide work. And he was saying with one application of the fertilizer, they have better knapweed control than they did with 7 years of herbicide on the same or similar site. So unbeknownst to me, he has become an evangelist for this approach. So it would be better for me to point to him and say, and Paul, for an endorsement from the state agency, but he's not here to do that. So this is a local example.
He was here last month.
Oh, well, I got it. Okay. My ears should have been burning. So here's a little more of a researchy kind of a way of thinking about that knapweed example. So in this graph, this is a plant health index. So it's essentially an average plant vigor and height and biomass. And this is micronutrient solution concentration in milligrams per liter. And this is comparing blue bunch wheatgrass, which basically has the same plant health no matter what the micronutrient solution concentration in the soil is. And at the same time, spotted knapweed has excellent health concentration at 0. And as the concentration increases, it very rapidly drops in vigor with relatively low amounts of this micronutrient fertility. And this is sort of the backbone of some of the other examples I'm going to show you today. The perennial desirable late successional native plants. They really are neutral to happy with these micronutrient fertilizers, and the weeds hate them. And some of this is about soil ecology and the mycorrhizal fungal networks in the soil, totally important. So cheatgrass is what I'm going to talk most about, but many of these weeds have poorly developed mycorrhizal associates, and our native plants have very well developed fungal distribution because these fungi, they regulate nutrient delivery to the plant. So they extend plants' ability to reach nutrients outside the reach of their roots, which is kind of black magic. If you're a plant, is to have fungus that you swap some sugar with that's willing to extend your reach to water and to nutrients. But it also has a regulatory function to help them from over consuming. And the weeds are just sort of over consumers, and they tend to not perform well when the nutrient levels go up. Unless that's nitrogen, and the weeds love nitrogen. So this is my only turf slide, but this is my yard on the left side that shares a boundary with my neighbor, and neither of us use herbicide on our yards. I use fertilizer and he doesn't. And so if you don't want dandelions in your yard, they're this same story I'm telling you, this can work. And there's a bag I'm sending to Pedro that has the cocktail.
My neighbor's gonna love this. See, I pull my dandelions, he doesn't, and it's just every year, he's just pollinating the whole neighborhood.
So you can see I have some of his dandelions that are poaching. I got one there and I got one there, and I do pop a few of them out. But this is manageable to dig a few dandelions. That is unmanageable. That's a disaster area. And from my perspective, from Rebecca's perspective, we don't really, turf grass isn't our passion in life, but we don't like herbicide treated dogs and children. I think using herbicides in our close proximity to our houses, to where our people live, I think is probably not a great idea. Matter of fact, I don't even like going to the hardware store this time of year because they have leaky bags of wheat and feed in the store, and it smells like a super fun site.
I got a question, so that's very.
It is, because I figured out, because well, it has all of them in there. Because in that Becca, would you hold that bag that has all the macro and micronutrients in it, but it's heavy in nitrogen and it's heavy in boron as my lead micronutrient in this formulation. But I have patents on this too, so you can't steal all my ideas.
That's okay.
I know we're in that. In the for entrepreneurs, they call the place we're in the valley of death. When you have a really good idea, you have no revenue, and you're trying to like get your story out. Early adopters and license. We're getting some traction. We're getting there. Every year's a little better. We haven't had a Christmas party with champagne bottles.
I want to focus on the home lawn market.
And we have people testing it that have had shocking results that are like that. Now, I'll tell you this as a joke on my fertilizer beside friends, is we sent them this product and I tell them, well, this isn't really gonna happen real quickly. Like if you put them out in August, maybe in the fall, you'll start to see some differences, and by the spring it'll be better. And I get an email like a week later, oh my God, it's happening already. And so one example is that we took their turf weeds, and they weren't as hard. It was more like clover and buttercup, and they were weeds. This was actually a European example, but they went from heavy weed cover to 50% reduced in 2 weeks to 95% reduced in 2 months. And they said, can you make it less effective so we can sell it every year? What's wrong with fixing the problem, right? Because I have test plots on turf that are 4 years old, And they still have some weeds in them, but the untreated is 50% weeds, and 4 years after one application of that stuff, I have 5% weeds. So it is quite long lasting. But I'm not here to talk about turf, but I thought it would help get your attention to say, we're working on this. How about Canadian thistle? Anybody ever sprayed a Canadian thistle? These are hard. Even herbicides are not good on Canadian thistle. Like when you say nuke it with Escort or Tordon or whatever your favorite herbicide is. 240, yeah. They don't translocate herbicides into their roots. They have this root system that goes to China. You can mow them, cut them, burn them, spray them, and it's like the cat came back story. The cat came back the very next day. He thought it would go. The thistle came back. It just wouldn't stay away. Well, as it turns out, this is a foliar spray. So we're talking about granular dry pellets tonight, but thistles absolutely hate this micronutrient spray. I think it works better than the herbicides do. So that's kind of a fun story. But not one I'm going to go into tonight because we're working on cheatgrass. But what if we talked about oxeye daisy first? Anybody have any oxeye experience? I see heads nodding. Yeah, oxeye doesn't like this one little bit. And Becca, this is a crosscut test plot just for reference. How about tansy? Anybody have any tansy growing like along a ditch or a riparian area? I have a friend in the Bitterroot who has a bunch of tansy on his property and he likes this micronutrient thing. And he said, how can I make this really simple? And I took the fertilizer and I poured it about 1 inch deep in a beer can. And I took a picture of it and said, put this much on every tansy plant you have. So he doesn't have to weigh it. He doesn't have nothing fancy. He just has a scoop. You know, he puts a scoop and dumps it on, because you know how tansy plants are, you know, they're a few feet by a few feet, and then they're gone. Okay, so cheatgrass, that's the main event tonight. Does everybody here fight cheatgrass? Is that a common? Yeah, it's not like if you look at a cheatgrass map of US where the problems are, Montana doesn't even show up because it's so bad in the Basin and Range and in Washington, Oregon. So my question to you is, does this photo show a native bunchgrass community retarding the invasion of cheatgrass? Is it holding its own? Or if I went back to the same place, would the cheatgrass have taken over? Like what is their seed sources here? Are these seeds coming into this bunchgrass area and not growing? Or is this a battle we're losing? Or why is it the soil here keeps the cheatgrass out? Is there something unique about this soil? Was that a disturbed area? I don't know the history of this site, but fence line effects, roadsides, it's very common to find cheatgrass in defined areas like that. So I kind of talked you through Edaphix. I haven't given you your Greek lesson for the day. So the word Edaphic means of the soil from the Greek Edaphos. I realize Edaphic is a weird name and Edaphix is an even stranger name, but that's where it came from. I guess I'm gonna.
What's the difference between Edaphix and
Edaphix is the parent company and Nutrifix is our cheatgrass product.
Oh.
And we may use the term Nutrifix on the future turf product as well. We haven't decided if we're going to change the rangeland product to Nutrifix rangeland and Nutrifix turf, but we have both of those names registered.
you have different product names for different needs?
More, not yet. We're trying not to use names like plunder or destroyer. Because I have a really interesting conversation going with EPA, is I can't kill any weeds without making them distressed. And what they want to do, if you can kill a weed with beer or, you know, the cookies over here, if you put one of those cookies on the plant and killed it, and you wanted to sell that, you'd have to register that as a cookie herbicide. So any killing of plants makes EPA want you to register as a weed killer. So we're out competing weeds. So in all presentations like this, and I had a long conversation with EPA and they gave me free consulting, as they said, just don't kill any weeds. You can outcompete them all day long. You can fertilize all, because EPA is expressly prohibited from regulating fertilizers. So they're kind of in a box, because when the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act of 1982 was passed, the farmers' lobby said, please don't take away our fertilizers. So in the preamble of the statute, it says fertilizers are exempted from registration by EPA as an herbicide. And the farmer said, wow, we saved our bacon with that one. And then EPA said, well, don't be so quick. What if those fertilizers harmed plants? Would they be herbicides? So that's, welcome to my strange world with EPA. And I could talk for an hour about this, but that's enough of a preview to give you a regulatory nightmare. The bullet I wanted to mention here is, the story I'm telling you today, I want you to think of this as a toolbox. And it's the toolbox we use to manage plants has too few tools in it. This is a tool, this is not perfect. Like glyphosate is the world's most popular and broad selling herbicide, Roundup. It's super cheap, it's super effective. It is a tool in the toolbox. I try not to use that tool. I prefer an herbicide or a petrochemical free approach to, but glyphosate is a tremendous tool used in the right way. This is a tool. But I should show you some examples. So what would happen if we went out? So this is a fertilizer cart from Dillon. So this is a local example. We filled it up with some stuff that looks like the bag over there on the countertop. And we went out and we put it down on the ground in 2019. And this is the next spring. So this is 12 months after application. And you can't see this so well, but essentially everything untreated here is seemingly 100% cheatgrass. And where we treated is seemingly 100% perennial grass. And I'll have to show you another photo and I'll define that a little better. But it's kind of a fun story about the ranch manager, because he was new to this property and this project was done the previous year by the previous manager. And he went to the file cabinet and pulled out this folder called cheatgrass fertilization. And he thought he'd gone to the craziest, the loony bin. Like, who in the world would fertilize cheatgrass? This is the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. Well, and if you look at the ranch, these pastures are all mapped as the cheatgrass pastures. And they have seeded them and tried different grazing and they've burned them and they've tried herbicides and nothing worked. And so they said, well, we don't think your stuff will work either, but come out and do it for us anyway, and we'll see what happens. So this is my nuanced photo. So this is a cover frame, 20 by 50 centimeters. So it's just a piece of metal thrown on the ground so we can estimate the cover. So in July of the next year, the untreated looks like cheatgrass. Well, that's all there is there. And the treated areas, we had 54% perennial grass and 5% annual grass 1 year after treatment. So we were super happy with that. But the nuance to this photo is that we didn't see this. Like, where did these perennial grasses even come from? So if you look in the upper right frame, there are two white arrows. And those white arrows right here You can only see this on like a big computer monitor zoomed in. There are 2 blades of green perennial grass. So these grasses were actually growing here. These did not germinate from seed. They grew back from the existing plants. As far as I can tell, they came from plants that were already there.
Seed source.
From, I think it was from
Yeah.
the seed bank, not from any kind of suckering.
No, I think these are propagules from the plants.
From the
The
plant.
actual life, there, hopefully there was some seed. And I have a great set of plots in Utah where we seeded these diverse forb mixes and we got better germination on the forbs with the fertilizer than we did. But I don't have time to tell that story. So this is a photo of going back to those same sites last year. That's Rebecca measuring cover in the treated plots. There's not very much cheatgrass there. We had a lot more water last year than we did in 2021. The untreated, there are some perennial grasses in here, but it's still basically 100% cheatgrass. And as you look at our treated area at this landscape level, the cheatgrass here is still green. It hasn't cured out yet, but it's essentially an ocean of cheatgrass with a 20-acre island of perennial grass that came from us driving across there with a hopper truck from Dillon full of fertilizer.
So the idea being that you're also boosting up the native bunch grass community too, right?
Absolutely. And another piece of this that is sort of a happy accident is that the rancher has a problem because the forage has more nutrients in it. And the livestock think it tastes better. And yeah, they have to fence the livestock out of the treated areas.
How do you negotiate on that?
Yeah, that's, you do the entire landscape. That's the best way to do it. But I do have test plots the size, like the size of the concrete here. And I'll have wildlife come in and eat the plants down an inch tall. And right when they get to the edge of the test plot, they quit. It's like they mowed, like they can taste, like you have a taste for IPAs.
Oh, yeah.
And you can tell this one from that one. Or you have a taste for coffee that's from a special grow it.
Yeah.
We have all those.
Yeah.
Grazers are like 100 times more sensitive to nutrients than
They don't want cheatgrass.
they.
Like all the,
What soil types is that most effective on? I mean, I can see where it decomposes or living, so not so much.
Yeah, those are hard. So nutrients are retained in soil by organic matter and clay minerals. So decomposed granites are a flunk on organic matter and they're a flunk on clay minerals. So those are harder sites. So then we're into strategies for how I'll show you a roadside here, which is a site like that where it worked really well. So it's not a deal killer, but I have like this beautiful example. This is one of my best examples. So this is a bragging kind of slide set. Sometimes it's not this perfect, but I'll show you a roadside example here in a few slides. So where do annual grasses grow? The bullet I would point out in this storyline is like the war on weeds is kind of this symbolic, alignment of all of us trying to manage our invasive plants. And in some ways that invokes a war. It makes you sound angry. Like we're going to go, this is wrong. And we're going to go out and fix this. And really the cheatgrass is smart because it's growing where the soil conditions are well suited to its growth. So we can't really be so mad at it because we built this monster by creating the soil that it loved to grow in. So it is well adapted to nutrient poor soils that are in dry land conditions. So if you want to switch from, and this is my Photoshop example of cheatgrass and weedy species versus diverse native plant rich rangeland. How do we make that transition? And part of it is management. The soil chemistry is a huge deal. So what we're trying to do is so I'm a soils guy. And these are the soil forming factors. This is how you make soil. Topography is a factor, climate, parent material, there's the granite. You know, that comes in here. And it takes time. So in this climate, it might take 1,000 years to build an inch of organic soil. I mean, that's a preposterous, we don't have 1,000 years. We don't have that kind of time. How do we work with this system in order to get back to the type of soils we want and the plant communities we want? And changing the fertility is one thing we can do. So my background is in geology, so I'm intrigued by the composition of the Earth's crust. So in short, it's about 50% oxygen, or 47%, it's 28% silica, it's 8% aluminum. So about 3/4 of the mineral matter of the Earth is aluminosilicates or feldspars. Well, those aren't plant macro or micronutrients. So what are the plants going to use? So iron and calcium and sodium and potassium and magnesium, those make up smaller wedges, and some of those are plant nutrients. But nitrogen, for example, is the most important plant macronutrient. It isn't even in the rocks. So nitrogen is all coming from biological processes that are happening in the soil. So what's really important to the plants is the soil solution. So that is the pie diagram on your right, my left. So 25% of the soil is air, 25% of it's water, 50% of it is the mineral soil, or 45% is actually the mineral soil. This little 5% wedge is the organic matter. If you're lucky enough to have 5% organic matter, that, you know, in the better soils of the big hole, you would have 5%. But on a south facing upland, you'd be lucky to have 1%. So I am in this slide introducing the idea of the soil solution. And just think about the soil solution as a rainstorm falling on dry soil. And then the next day you pull all the water out of that soil. What is the chemistry of that solution that the plants are drinking, or that you pulled off of that plant? So, or off of that soil. So the soil in a 12-inch precip zone, that is 325,000 gallons per year per acre. So that's a tremendous amount of water. You wouldn't think that an acre of soil 6 inches deep could weigh 1,000 tons. And this is an equally unbelievable amount of water in an acre foot of soil. So in that acre foot of soil, we have dissolved all the mineral constituents that are in theory all of the requirements that a plant needs in its life cycle. Well, the tricky part of this is that the soil we're working with doesn't look like this. We don't have that big, thick, dark organic soil, because that's how the mineral soil gets dissolved, is the microbiology of that upper 6 inches of soil with all the organic matter. It makes the organic acids that dissolve the soils and make them available to plants. So as we have lost organic matter, and we have more organic matter as CO2 in our atmosphere now than we used to, and we don't want. Well, this is one of the consequences of having lower amounts of soil carbon, is that we're less able to dissolve the mineral soils in the soil. So we create this condition of being permanently nutrient depleted. So how important is the soil solution? So my grandfather was a miner underground in Butte in the year 1899. And here I am in the 1990s doing test plots of revegetation in the tailings of Butte. So in this example, this deer who is hanging out in my test plot, why is it I have this problem with test plots being eaten by wildlife? Well, because there's nothing else. So in this case, we added lime, ground calcium carbonate, we added organic matter, we seeded with native plants, and we were able to grow plants very successfully in their mine tailings at Montana Resources. Because when they built this mine, and this giant, that's the Yankee Doodle tailings impoundment, that's about 1,000 acres. they didn't save any topsoil. So how are they going to reclaim that giant tailings pond in the future? So our suggestion was, well, what if you got smart and you made your own soil? Instead of looking somewhere to borrow soil, what if you made plant growth media as a substitute? But we were focused on the soil solution. And just so you can scare your friends, I put a couple of dose response curves in here. Nobody, if we had said dose response curve is going to be shown at the watershed meeting, there would be nobody here.
Or maybe a lot of people you don't want to.
Yes.
I turned this, I made a slide that I forgot to put in here. I said, well, dose response curve is just like drinking wine. If you haven't had any wine, you're actually deficient. And if you've had like 3 or 4, you've reached optimal amount of wine consumption. And if you drink 10, it's toxic. So the same is true with all of our nutrients, is that there is an optimal amount where you get robust plant health associated with the best nutrient conditions. So if you're a farmer and you're growing alfalfa, you're focused on phosphorus because you want to get your optimum productivity, your optimum quality. You want this level of fertility. So thinking about rangeland, not thinking about alfalfa, the problem is this deficient zone is where the weeds like to hang out. So this is where cheatgrass wants to live. And if you're a Superfund site, this is where only specialized plants, there are no dandelions growing in this specialized plant phytotoxic zone. So if we went to the Berkeley pit or we went to the Anaconda smelter, there would be very few plants that are in this phytotoxic zone. So our goal is to take from a perennial plant point of view, we want to take the fertility deficit from 3 to 5 to get into the zone that's best suited to our native perennial plant life and not to invasive plants. Or another way to look at that is with another set of dose response curves, which is to suggest that weeds have their best productivity at a lower level of fertility compared to the desirable species that we want in the big hole, or that we want on the Anaconda smelter site, or that we want in Butte. So we are again trying to push this fertility level, and we are focused on micronutrients because we have found that the weeds hate them and the desirable plants love them. So when I'm talking about nutrients, remember I'm not an NPK fertility guy. So if we took an example of a soil solution, and I promise I'm not going to keep going on graphs and figures and toxicity curves, we're not done here. So this is a pie diagram of a real soil solution, and these examples come from the Deer Lodge Valley. So we took distilled water, we put it on the soil, we pulled the water off, we analyzed what was in it. About 40% of it, I should say about 60% of it, 70% of it was calcium. So calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium, they're just giant parts of the soil solution. And remember, nitrogen is the thing that they really need, and there is hardly any nitrogen is yellow in this color. So you can see in the depleted example, nitrogen is just a little wedge. It's a little bit bigger wedge in the healthy system. But I want to point out the absence of the micronutrients. So the micronutrients are all aggregated together. So this is copper, zinc, boron, iron, manganese, molybdenum. So all 7 of those micros, they're basically absent from this depleted rangeland soil. And in a healthy soil, there's a tiny amount of them that are present. And just like it is with a multivitamin that you might take in the morning to make sure you're getting all your nutrition, well, the amount of all those micronutrients in that multivitamin is tiny, but it's not to say they're unimportant. That's one of the reasons we should all eat leafy vegetables, like our doctor says. So the Edaphix discovery is that healthy soils support late successional plant species when they have higher levels of non-nitrogen fertility compared to disturbed sites. Okay, you've heard my pitch. And this is the anticlimactic vision of what the treatment looks like on the ground. So this is the 20 by 50 cover frame, and there's the treatment. Well, this is an actual application rate. I don't remember what the number was, you know, maybe it's 100 or a couple hundred pounds an acre. These are these little pellets. You know what fertilizer looks like. It's a yawner. If you want to, it's like worse than watching paint dry. And this is what the cheatgrass looks like the next spring when it germinates in that soil solution with the elevated micronutrients. And that's the way I like my cheatgrass to look. And so I'm going to go a couple of slides here on healthy soil, because that's where we're trying to go. And there's a lot of emphasis that's been put on soil health, and most of that has been done for cropping systems. I love that USDA is thinking about rangeland because they have a root point of view. Just look at these gigantic roots. So sagebrush, what is that?
The rabbit brush.
I can't quite read that one. Sandberg bluegrass, lupin, buckwheat, some kind of blue bunch wheatgrass, thick spike wheatgrass. There's cheatgrass. So you get a little crappy root system on the cheatgrass. It's not contributing any soil carbon. So what I did is I took their plants and then I made my own soil profiles to go with them, because I think this is what's happened that have put us in this impaired soil box over here. Because you see this site has a very thin organic A horizon. It has a whole lot of cheatgrass. It has low fertility. So we have gone from this deep, thick, rich, organic, native plant dominated. We have nitrogen fixers with lupin, and with increasing disturbance, we end up in this seemingly unfixable box. So if I put on my herbicide, I have an herbicide hat. I shouldn't bring that to a talk like this. I put my herbicide hat on. Well, you just spray these guys and you get rid of them and it's better. Well, my point of view is they'll be back because you haven't fixed the problem, because the problem is your soil health is terrible. So what we're trying to do is to run this in reverse. So we're trying to take these terrible sites. The blue color here is adding the fertilizer. The fertilizer helps us to promote the growth of the late successional plants. And with time, we can go back to what we started with. And another piece of this is fire frequency. These native rangelands are all adapted to fire. They are not adapted to the frequent and intense fire cycles that we have in the Western US. So this is one of the reasons that we have the problem we do with the weeds. So this is my summary of the native plant healthy soil, is that we need to have all of these micro and macronutrients in the soil system. We need to have the organic matter. We need to have the deep rooted perennial native plants that hold these systems together. And I'm preaching to the choir because that's why you are here tonight. So I thought I would tell a few quick stories to keep this fun. So I have test plots in places other than Montana. So here's one in Utah. So I have a colleague there who invited me. He dared me to try his site because this site was so terrible. And this is what the untreated site looks like. All this light colored stuff is cheatgrass. This green shrub is broom snakeweed, not a palatable forage plant. And they came in and did a whole bunch of herbicide trials, and the annual grasses went away, but they had no perennial grasses. So they drill seeded them, and none of the drill seeded plants came up because the herbicide that is most effective on the cheatgrass also kills all the seeds. So it kills the seeds of the cheatgrass, which is its great tool for helping fight cheatgrass. It can work really well when you have a bunch of good vegetation. Well, they just got more broom snakeweed. And here's an example. You can see the boundary between untreated and the herbicide. So he said, well, give me some plots on that fertilizer. Well, 1 year later, it was all blue bunch wheatgrass. And he said, you've got to be kidding. That's all you did is you put down the fertilizer and that stuff all grew up. I said, yep, that's all we did. Because the seed was in the seed bank, or the plants were these little puny guys. And I think I did get lucky in terms of where he told me to put the plots, because I didn't have all the broom snakeweed. But it's like these plots are 50 yards away from these other plots, are all right in the same place.
And I have to suspect that seeing the seed bank that we saw pop back up in the Anaconda uplands,
Right?
the fact that there's a seed bank there, that all we did was activate it. I gotta think that the seed bank that we need is just about anywhere.
Yeah, Milltown Reservoir, after they dug out all those mine
It's
tailings,
still there.
the floodplain soils resprouted.
Yeah.
100 years later.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
So here's some test plots in Wyoming that a university researcher, he wanted to try the fertilizer. And this is a ridiculous rate that no reasonable person would do. It's more than 1,000 pounds per acre. But he was doing a toxicity study of using like 50 pounds an acre, 100, 200, or 500, 1,000, 1,500. He was trying all these rates across a broad spectrum. And I just want to point out how selective. This was a real weedy site. It's mostly cheatgrass. Well, that is a crested wheatgrass plant, and that's a smooth brome. So if you were trying to get rid of crested wheatgrass or smooth brome, this fertilization thing did not work. All the other weeds went away, but it looks like a glyphosate kind of a treatment. It's so strong on all the other weeds. I like this photo because of the defiance of those introduced grasses to ruling the world. Okay, Colorado, this is the west slope. This is Grand Junction area. This is comparing the Edaphix treatments, which are the green squares, to plateau herbicide. And nothing grew on the plateau sites. The cheatgrass was not controlled, and the desirable plants did not germinate. And another example from that site that I like is this small test plot. But interestingly, that green plant right there is this green plant right here. And this is the same plant growing off-site. And the point the researcher wanted to make was that look how green the plant is when the cheatgrass is controlled, because you get more water into the deep root system. So you're recharging the aquifer, you're allowing the plant to stay green later. It's better forage being green later. It's more fire resistant being green later. So cheatgrass has a water robbing characteristic as well, which is not a good thing in the Western US. So this is my data from Fleecer up the hill here. I did this, or actually these are Vanna's data. We had several plots there, but to make it simple, the red line is the cheatgrass cover. The green line is the perennial grass cover. This is 1, 2, 3, 4. No, I think this is pre-treatment. So this is 3 years of growth after an initial treatment. So we started out with 25% perennial grass, and we ended up with 75% perennial grass. And over that same time, we went from 67% cheatgrass to 13% cheatgrass. So they just got better and better year after year. So not my data, Vanna's data. And I promised there would be a roadside of degraded. This is terrible soil, no topsoil. I like this photo because the cheatgrass, its phenology was red. Perennial grasses are all green. So after this is about 3 years after a one-time application. And you can see that, and these photos were taken minutes apart. It's just the photo of the treated versus the untreated. And the thing I like best about this is that look how many more perennial grass plants there are. So that not only is the cheatgrass gone, but the perennials that produce seed fell on the soil. And since the cheatgrass wasn't there to compete with them, the perennials reestablished. So now we have the existing perennials that were there, plus their progeny that have established on that site as the cheatgrass went away.
Don't you have the cheatgrass in the seed bank though already? So
Sure,
it's not the perennial grass seed just dropping on the untreated or the treated soil, right? It would be, I would think it'd be coming up in the seed, in the soil too, right?
on this, on the
No,
untreated.
treated too, like it's like the next growing season, I would assume.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Cheatgrass.
Yeah, because there's probably not much of a seed bank here because it's a relatively recent road project.
What about if you did have like a big seed bank of cheatgrass for years and years?
It doesn't like this. So cheatgrass seed lasts 4 or 5 years.
Bro,
So if you can make it 4 or 5 years, you sort of dried out the seed bank. So
Okay.
you shouldn't have very many viable seeds left after that much time. But going to the turf grass example, that's the holy grail, is to make the soil so that the weeds don't want to grow there.
Right.
So even if you took the seeds out there, you took viable weed seeds, you put them on the soil that wouldn't grow.
Because you've changed the company.
It changed
There's
the
so much
chemistry.
perennial competition now that the weeds don't have that environment where they take off.
And the way to perpetuate that is with good management, because
Yeah.
if you manage so that the withdrawals from the soil are offset by the inputs, you can go forever with a one-time treatment.
Yeah.
So like comparing intensive grazing to managed grazing, like in intensive grazing, you're mining nutrients out of the soil. So you're essentially creating a soil disturbance by intensive management that's not, the soil isn't able to sustain that level of high grazing pressure year after year. So the trick is to fix it and then manage it well.
I think it's right, liquid formulation micronutrients.
We have that's something we're working on in the turf formulation this summer. Matter of fact, Becca was spraying some of those earlier in the week. So all of this fertilizer, you can go either granular or liquid thing. It would work faster. Yeah, it would definitely be good early on. The granular tends to be higher application rates and longer lasting, and the liquid tends to be faster acting but shorter duration treatment. Well, hopefully it's washing it into the soil because the plants need. Yeah, there's no doubt there is a certain amount of, movement downslope with. And I remember that was a question we had when we started doing that, and on the uplands were using fertilizers.
Yeah.
Like, are we going to harm the Bigelow River?
Yeah.
By using fertilizers and then putting nitrogen into the big hole? And our answer was, well, we're not trying to establish corn cross level fertility. We're trying to get the levels up to low.
Yeah.
We were I actually recently went back, I summarized all the soil plots that we did over the years. I have 220 soil samples now, all in one spreadsheet. And I was looking at less than 0.2% organic matter on some of those. And then I had little notes, what made me think of it, little notes from one of the soil labs said, you need boron.
Oh, fascinating.
And they said, your micronutrients are really deficient. You should look into and I think the fertilizer product that we started using has that micronutrient component. I think we early on figured out that it's not the NPK, it's the micronutrients that are really doing the trick. A lot of this is circling way back to some of the first thought processes we went through.
So if you track your formulations to the point where you can actually favor one certain plant over another, if you want to change the plant composition to that thing, you get more chemically.
I don't have that skill. I would say we're in version 2.0 of this technology, and you're thinking about version 4.0. I hope to get there, but this is the beginning of truly designing the soil to favor a particular plant. Like one of my favorite examples right now is the lithium mine they want to permit in Reno, Nevada, right next to Tesla's Gigafactory to build Tesla, Elon Musk's cars. And there is an endangered plant called, it's a buckwheat, Tiam's buckwheat. And it grows in soil that's high in lithium and boron. And that's why there's a mineable deposit of lithium and boron right there, is that's where the plant grows. And that's the only place the plant grows. So they have listed it as an endangered species now. So they're trying to figure out how they can relocate it or find a soil where that plant will grow in.
Three seeds that I love on that, leafy spurge.
Yeah, I'll start with my worst one first. That's the toad flax.
Yeah.
I have limited toad flax data. But I think we have some on Mount Hagen.
Last year, Vanna and Jeff Copeland, who was here last month, they did their first test plot on Dalmatian and I think yellow.
So
And
on June 14th, I will see those for the first time. So I'll be able to have a better answer for you.
I'm not sure for the leafy spurge.
No, I've done leafy spurge elsewhere, and that's kind of a fun story because I've been bouncing back and forth between liquid and granular. And at first I thought the granular didn't work and I just wasn't patient. And I came back several years later and here was the test plot with no leafy spurge in it. But it took a couple, it took a while to do its magic. But the liquid is good, and hound's tongue is tricky as a taproot. Like if you spray the liquid on a hound's tongue, it just laughs at you, like doesn't do anything. You spray enough of the liquid on the plant that it drains down and the root takes it up. Quite effective on hound's tongue. So we have a couple of collaborators who are trying granular on hound's tongue, and I would say we have promising observations on that. I'm not ready to sell you a box of something to put on hound's tongue.
Another question, have you had any test plots or anything that you've got like a wildfire come through and they've done fire retardant on top of it? Because I've noticed like in weeds, if fire retardant, that's where your weeds are really coming back.
Oh, interesting. Well, sometimes they have used nitrogen-based fire retardant, so that would make sense to me. Yeah, you would get weeds back. I have used the fertilizer on previously burned sites, like while it was still black, and that worked okay, but not with the retardant. No experience with that.
What kind of range would you use on rangeland?
Yeah, it's usually like we have a standard rate, 275 pounds. But we also use rates of 100 and 200. And so it's a kind of a sliding rate. It's not a rate like 10 pounds or 20. It's a rate like 100, 200, 300. Yeah, and it varies. Like the quantity wise, the more you buy, the cheaper it is. But like we rarely pay less than $1 a pound for the fertilizer. So it's typically between $1 and $2. So it's typically a couple, $300, $400, $500 an acre. So it's not a $10 an acre kind of a thing. So we're working on that. And the more product we sell, the better pricing we can provide. But right now we are in the relatively expensive zone, but also the upfront cost is relatively expensive, and it gets really cheaper if you analyze, like comparing it to herbicides. If you look at the outcomes, like the herbicides generally don't grow any better vegetation. Or if you look at forage production, or you look at life cycle cost, we're much more competitive than just the upfront cost analysis.
Yeah.
Or like the Fish, Wildlife and Park example, they got better results in naphthalene in year 1 than they did 7 years of herbicide treatment. So the initial application of the herbicide would be way cheaper, but by the time you got to 7 years of labor and product, that wouldn't be cheaper.
One of the unique things about this, you're playing long game, so rather than X, it's bigger houses, so you're one. Well, chemistry, but you're getting to work within your management goals.
And it's a scale thing too. And once you're at scale, I mean, if things go according to plan and you're just producing more volume, but then you crank this stuff out, then it really starts becoming competitive.
And what's one thing I should talk to you about in terms of partnership is we're working with a philanthropist who is interested in this kind of work, and they are potentially interested in subsidizing like the work of watershed committees to achieve the outcome on the ground with the private producers. And I can't deliver that to you today, but we can talk about it. And I think it is something that is not out of the realm of possibility.
I mean, I think the work with Vanna and the fact that you've got a range manager, a manager of a large amount of ground that needs treatment feels like it's a great place to start. And then, as landowners, anyone that is turned on to this and gets interested and wants to reach out to us and figure out how to do it and has a good site, that's kind of the idea. We'll be the connector for you.
And Bayer is another interesting example with one of their cheatgrass herbicides, is they always got this cost question in meetings, and now they say, it doesn't matter, we'll teach you how to write the grants to get it for free. Because they found out that if the people who were buying the product, even if they gave them the product, they didn't have the time to apply it, or they didn't have the ability to monitor it. It's like the product was too expensive, but even free was too expensive, if that makes any sense.
What would happen if you put that on in the fall with several?
That's the best. My best application time is August, because it's just before the fall rains come and the plants start greening up in September. But I put it on in the winter time, so to put it on in the late fall would be a great time to do it. Like you can put it on in the spring, but you're dependent on spring moisture. Like we had a relatively dry May in Bozeman. So if you put it out May 1st, nothing would have happened. It'd still be sitting on the ground. But if you get a wet May, it can all dissolve and you can get a good response like that. Snowcrest Ranch example I showed where it was so good. That was a spring application. But it was a wet spring. So I think fall, late summer, fall is a great time to do it. Yeah, spring is a hard time to get out of the ground, especially if it's a wet spring, because the snow just comes off and you got the frost in the ground and it's the top 6 inches of soup. And then you wait for it to dry out and it's still soft and then it rains all the time. Yeah, and you've got 1,000 other things to do every spring too that you didn't know were coming. So you have no time in the spring.
Have you used any aerial?
We did aerial with some of the Mount Hagen work, but I haven't done aerial with this fertilizer yet. I have several projects that are on the verge of doing it, but nobody's done it yet.
Oh, you did with this product, you've done it aerial?
No, not yet.
No, just the area you're talking about is just our fertilization.
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
That's all the stuff you guys know about.
Yeah. It's not that there's no technology barrier there.
Yeah,
It's just we
Put it in the land.
Yeah, we haven't done it. Okay, I think I should wrap up because I'm getting close to the end here and it's after 9 o'clock. Okay, there's a test plot. Okay, cheatgrass went away. Gotta love that. When to apply, we just talked about that. conclusions, it's effective, it's made from naturally occurring minerals, it's easy to apply, long lasting, restores soil fertility. If you wanted to buy this stuff, there is a website. So this ACF is my distributor on this product. And we have business cards, or Pedro knows how to find us. Cost per ton? Yeah. See, the hard thing for me is my distributor is in Washington and he has a warehouse in Idaho Falls. So there's a transportation part of it that I don't have a good number on. It kind of a sliding scale depending on what you need, but like 100 on the low end and 300 on the high end. But it's going to be a few $100s an acre the way it's set up right now, and we're doing what we can to make that number go down. But the fertilizer pricing bounces around too as part of the global market too. So we have that uncertainty baked into our pricing too. So our pricing moves around a little bit. But it's not $10 an acre. It's not a number like that. Yeah. No, you can buy 50-pound bags. Yeah, it's in 50s. Or like, yeah, you could. We can figure out, like, the more 50-pound bags start to not make sense. If, like, you remember the hopper cart example, that didn't come out of 50-pound bags. That was from Rocky Mountain Supply, and we just told them what mix to put in the cart. So we're not restricted to 50-pound bags. But most often people want to buy a 50-pound bag to try it. Oh, and by the way, if you want to try it, we do have a box and some samples here if anybody wants to take a sample home and throw it out on the ground.
That's a cheatgrass sample.
I have a few turf. It's mostly cheatgrass, but I do have a few turf bags too. And Pedro, I think that is my last slide.
All right. Any final questions? Folks, all right, let's give Stuart a big round. Thanks everybody for coming, and we'll meet again in June. We will be talking fish. It won't be pretty. The big old fish numbers have just come out and it's not great. In fact, it's terrible, and we'll hear about that in June.